Part 131. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1306. Success. Really successful. Created blood out of thin air. With a shout, the laboratory was filled with people. Here in the magic experiment team, 5 or 6 necks stretched hard. Gretel even saw a few rays of eagle eye spells, and 2 arcane eyes flew over. In the animal breeding group, 2 elves ran here in a hurry, one grabbing the grass to feed the rabbits and the other holding a dustpan filled with rabbit droppings. He just ran 2 steps, bang, bang, and hit the invisible force field wall at the same time. On the spell team's side, almost all the elves quickly took action and used force field walls to keep them out. Don't come over here. This is a clean operating space. Don't bring your rabbit grass, rabbit droppings, rabbit hair, etc. here. Of course, in the technical preparation team, there were also 2 guys who were peeping out and were stopped outside. Also blocked outside were the needles, syringes, and needle tips dripping blood in their hands. There was such a fuss that Greed had to shout several times in succession to forcefully restore order. Next to her, Sarala took a step forward and raised her eyes. Quiet. The adult silver dragon's coercion was fully activated, overwhelming, and charged at close range. Bang 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 bang, the slender and exquisite ornaments on the tips of the elves' hair, the tips of their ears, and in their braids exploded one after another, tinkling and falling all over the floor. Although these accessories were blocking it and no one was hurt, the elves' excitement finally dropped. Gretel took the opportunity to command. Continue counting, follow the established experimental procedures, take multiple samples and test and count multiple times. Keep experimental records. Repeat the experiment. Everyone else, please continue your experiments. Let's test all the models. Under such harsh words, the elves seemed to be whipped by whips, and finally started to move according to the original protocol. Gretel stood in front of the laboratory with his hands behind his back, watching with satisfaction as they performed their duties. After a while, he turned around to face the whiteboard, grinned widely, and raised his arms. Hey! He suppressed his excitement and waved his fist silently and forcefully. Opposite him, Sarala stared at him unblinkingly, her beautiful silver blue eyes so bright. Multiple test counts have yielded good results. This spell, this newly created spell, can really stimulate the umbilical cord blood and replicate it in large quantities in the serum. Being able to replicate in large quantities and produce a large number of blood cells means that blood can be produced out of thin air, which means that those soldiers who have lost too much blood and have been weak for a long time can recover hundreds of times faster. Repeat the experiment. Repeat the experiment. In the excitement, Greed still did not forget the standard procedure. He put a big red circle on the corresponding spell on the whiteboard, turned around and commanded. You repeat the experiment first. According to the standard protocol, use different umbilical cord blood and serum, repeat it 10 times. Spell experiment group. Everyone followed the standard procedures, using different umbilical cord blood and serum, and repeated the experiment 10 times. Do a microscopic examination and record the experiment. Sighs arose. Throwing spells is not difficult, but after throwing the spells, you have to dilute, smear, and count, which is too difficult. Especially the counting thing, the horizontal, vertical, and dense grids. Each counting chamber is divided into 9 large squares, each with an area of 1.0 square millimeters. Each large square in the 4 corners is divided into 16 medium squares for counting white blood cells. The large square in the center is divided into 25 medium squares with double lines, and each medium square is divided into 16 small squares for a total of 400 small squares used to count red blood cells. 1 square millimeter. For 1 square millimeter, 400 small squares need to be drawn. There are so many lines that look like a black fog to the naked eye. They can only be seen clearly under a microscope. Only under a microscope can you use magic to copy these grids on glass. Only with the most concentrated and precise control can you copy the grid accurately and usable. It takes 4, 5, or even 10 times of copying to complete a usable copy. And now, with Greet's order, at least 50 grid glass pieces were removed. Bad luck, I have to cast the scribe spell 500 more times. Even if it's just the lowest level first level spell, cast it 500 times under a microscope. Vomit. Greet raised the corners of his mouth and looked at the wailing below with a smile. After reading it, he turned around, rolled up his sleeves, and waved to Cyrilla. Come, let's come too. Ah. Cyrilla whined, and her long pointed ears drooped. Are you going to start repeating experiments? Are you going to start lowering your head and staring at the microscope, one by one, throwing scribes onto 1 square millimeter glass pieces? The lines of 400 grids are accurately placed in a frame of 1 square millimeter. They are not allowed to be too big, not too small, not allowed to be crooked, and not allowed to be wrong. She doesn't want it. Not to mention, you still have to count the squares. From the 25 medium squares a total of 400 small squares, pick out 5 medium squares, increase the microscope magnification, and start counting the red blood cells in the small squares one by one. Every time I count, I feel dizzy and restless. Anger arose in my heart, and evil grew in my courage. I really wanted to make up random numbers and fill them in. Be good. It's time to practice spell micromanipulation. Gretel smiled and patted her, washed her hands, put on gloves, got fully armed, and began to operate. What a pity, he hasn't practiced this skill for many years. He once learned microscopic counting in school, and when he got to work. After work? After working, he is not in the laboratory. Why should he bother with this trouble? Even the laboratory department is not immune to this foreign crime. Once the tube is inserted into the blood test instrument, it will automatically spit out the data, and it can also automatically print and transmit. We can't use mental scanning, we really can't. Thump, 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 3 elves in a row were lying on the experimental table, grabbing the table with their heads. It's so tiring to count like this. Aseptic operation. Aseptic operation. Don't contaminate the experimental table, Greet drove them up ruthlessly. Scan using mental power? Using mental power, can you scan out how many red blood cells there are in a drop, or a milliliter of blood? Come on. Give it a try. No one dared to try. When Gretel first proposed microscopic examination, the elves jointly rioted once, and he directly threw out the test plan. Just take a drop of blood, dilute it as you please, you scan it, and I'll do a microscopic examination to see who reports a number that's closer to the truth. Except for the legendary elder, all the other elves were wiped out. Except for the legend, no one has such a delicate spiritual power. No one has the patience to count millions of red blood cells in 1 milliliter of blood. And, since even Elder Fahim is conscientiously counting red blood cells with his head down, the other elves have no room to be lazy. Thank you for the reward from Yanjiu, the leader. Thank you all for your tips, votes, and various comforts. Thank you. Today I still get happiness from writing articles and torturing the elves, especially when I think about their hard work of counting grids and red blood cells. I really laugh very happily. So you see, I will live well, don't worry. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1307. The elves worked hard to draw grids, copy, and count, and one by one they pressed themselves into panda eyes on the eyepiece of the microscope. Cyrilla is also working hard, drawing grids, copying grids, and counting. The defensive power of the silver dragon prevents the eyes from looking like panda eyes, but also creates two cute eye circles. Although the silver dragon girl muttered, her mouth pouting almost to the point of her pointed ears, she did not resist, nor did she stop. She knew that most of the dragon's use of power was fine in grand terms, but almost all of them had problems in fine terms. In terms of fine control, those of the same race who are willing to spend enough effort to control themselves often go further on the road to advancement. The dragon clan is an immortal species, but not an eternal species. Only by constantly advancing and advancing can it be possible to break away from the natural lifespan limit. Only after you become a legend can you talk about eternal life. With Gretel's current qualifications and achievements, every strong person from Nevis to Evermeet Island praises him as the unquestionable seed of legend, and there are almost no obstacles on the road to legend. And if she can't reach legend, how sad will Greet be in the future? Sarara, work harder. Study hard and exercise hard. You must not be thrown away by Gretel. Relying on the natural ability of the dragon clan, trying hard to rest on one's laurels, no matter how hard one tries, one cannot get the legendary one. It's a rare opportunity to have this opportunity to learn, exercise, and help Gretel at the same time. How great! Cyrilla, you must work hard. With Elder Fahim taking the lead, Cyrilla, who is usually the most squeamish, is also working with her head down. Naturally, the other elves cannot be lazy, and they cannot fish for work. Even so, after checking one group after another, it took an entire afternoon to complete even half of it. In the evening, after everyone got off work, the news spread like the wind. What? Little Gretel made something. What? Did little Gretel really achieve results? What? The new half-elf made a blood-replenishing magic that no one has made in thousands of years. This time even the legends couldn't sit still. The petals of the crystal flower flashed fiercely, and almost all legends sent communication requests to Elder Fahim. Elder Fahim sat in the room with a smile, stroking his white beard, and answered one question after another. No, it's still early. It's just a preliminary possibility, and it's still early to get the results. Little Greet said that there are still many issues to be studied later, and we will wait until everything is thoroughly studied. What exactly do we need to study? What resources and how many manpower are needed? I don't know that. I'm not Little Greet. I just follow his orders. He smiled happily, and none of the other legendary elders were as happy. The crystal flower trembled, and the petals were flying around. The elders looked at each other and cursed quietly. Old thing. Cunning guy. Hide your head and show your tail. He is quite proud of it. That little guy is not his disciple. As for Elder Green, he even carried the disciple directly in front of him and scolded him. Do you understand? Do you understand? Even if you don't want to understand, you don't need to participate in this project. They don't need you. Teacher, does necromancy really have nothing to do with it? In just a few days, Kusa Oak has lost twice as much weight, his cheeks and eye sockets have been dug deeply, and he looks completely different from before. As a clan of elves who are deeply loved by nature and nourished by the breath of nature every day, it is extremely rare for a half-step legend to have this situation happen. Don't you understand what the great elder said? Elder Green frowned deeply and stared at the disciple he had the highest hopes for. Kusa Oak sat there stiffly like a real oak tree. For a long time, his eyes took a turn. But, didn't those who studied necromancy and followed the path of necromancy all go into evil ways in the past? Elder Green's breath was stuck in his throat, he paused, then stomped away. Kusa Oak was stunned for a while, then got up like a zombie, staggered, and stood outside Greet's research room. He stood from dusk to late night, from late night to dawn the next day, from dawn to noon, and from noon until Greet and others filed into the research room to continue the unfinished verification yesterday. Even if no one deliberately told him the news, no one chatted with him, or even seemed to see him. The breath in the wind and the natural sound gave him enough information. Kusa-ok stood under the shade of a tree outside the laboratory for a whole afternoon. After the day's research work was over, he finally staggered, stood in front of Gretel, and bowed deeply. I figured it out. You are on the right path. I beg you, guide me, teach me, guide me in the direction I'm going. Gretel. Oh my God, are the elves finally giving in? Finally, I feel that his use of animals for experiments is correct and feasible, and should not be condemned, stopped, or at least educated. Greet let out a long sigh of relief. But on the surface, he still smiled softly and stepped forward quickly. There is no need to mention guidance and teaching. You are a half-step legend. Your knowledge and abilities in the natural field are far better than mine in many aspects. We can learn from each other and study together. Little Gretel, this is not possible. Before Kusa-ok could refuse, Elder Fahim had already walked out and said in a deep voice. You should be the leader, you should be the leader, you should be in charge of this project, and you should be in control of everything. Otherwise, if there are deviations in the research process or operation, who is responsible for it? Gretel was awe-inspiring. Indeed, now is not the time to be polite. As the leader of the research team, he needs to maintain his absolute authority. Moreover, even Elder Fahim is a member of the research team, and if he obeys any instructions from him, what virtue does Kusa-ok have, so that he can learn and research together? As soon as the idea came to his mind, Gretel quickly reached an agreement with Kusa-ok and included him in his research group. After Kusa-ok contributed all the resources he could muster, he devoted himself to Gretel's research with tenfold enthusiasm. Learn basic knowledge, learn treatment concepts, learn spell models, learn operating techniques. Finally, Kusa-ok's progress equaled Gretel's current progress. Then, he volunteered, took the initiative, consciously, and talked to himself, and took on the new verification work. The umbilical cord blood is injected into the rabbit, and then the mental power locks the umbilical cord blood, casts a spell, and increases the blood. Ah! Kusa-ok also let out a shrill scream. Why is this rabbit dying? Why? Already more than 6,000 votes. I have never received so many votes. Thank you all, thank you very much. The most urgent things have been done, and there is nothing that needs to be done immediately. We just need to slowly adjust and relax. The cat is still very, very tired and has no energy to update more times, so he can barely maintain 2 updates a day. All the extra updates will be remembered, and when I recover, every one of them will be paid back. Thank you all. I remember all your comfort and encouragement. In this cold winter, I am lucky to have you. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Giolan 2020. Chapter 1308. With screams, Gretel hurried over. With just one glance, I saw that Kusa-ok was sweating profusely, and he was throwing rejuvenation, healing, and cure fatal wounds down one by one. Throwing one away, the rabbit's condition seemed to be getting a little better. As soon as the healing spell stopped, he immediately collapsed. Moreover, the time for the treatment to take effect is getting shorter and shorter. Sigh, if we don't solve the fundamental problem and rely on treatment alone, how long can we survive? Gretel sighed, the light in his hand flickered, and he immediately threw down the vital signs monitoring spell. Measure electrocardiogram, heart rate, blood pressure, blood oxygen, and respiration. These spells have been integrated into a spell package by Gretel. He even had time to design the appearance and adjust the display interface of this spell. The light screen unfolded, revealing the appearance of the monitor he was most familiar with in his previous life. 1 line for electrocardiogram/heart rate, 1 line for blood oxygen saturation/blood oxygen numbers, and 1 line for respiration/respiratory rate. The numbers and lines go up and down, constantly changing. There are some small numbers up and down, such as blood pressure and pulse. An experienced doctor can immediately know the general condition of the patient and whether he is critical or not with just one scan. Even if the doctor is busy and cannot take his hands off, and encounters some critical situations, this vital sign monitoring can automatically alarm. The only problem is that it is too sensitive. If the vital signs of the monitored object are unstable and are in danger at any time, this thing can blow people's heads. If hung up on the battlefield, well, the effect is almost the same as that of an emergency room with a full workload. Gretel estimated that he himself could hold it, but none of the healers he trained could hold it. They would kneel half and cry half on the spot. At this moment, the monitor was hung on the rabbit. Greet raised his eyes and his face was slightly condensed. Without thinking, he threw out a lot of spells in his hand. Inspiration technique. Equivalent to hormones, correcting hypotension and maintaining vital signs. Anticoagulation. This was obtained from Black Crow Swamp. It is a spell used by necromancers to maintain blood. In an emergency, it can be used as heparin. Detoxification technique. Correct electrolyte imbalance, acidosis, etc., and prevent acute renal failure. Then hang a small bottle of physiological saline to increase the blood volume of the rabbit and resist shock. After finishing this series of work, Gretel breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that the rabbit's breathing gradually became stronger and the breath of life became stronger. He stopped and turned to Cuthaoak. "What have you done?" "I'm verifying the blood replenishing magic." Cuthaoak's cheeks were tense, and there was sweat on his forehead, cheeks, and palms. He glanced at Gretel quickly and lowered his head. Following the previous sequence, after verification with serum, the umbilical cord blood is injected into the rabbit that has lost blood. I know. Gretel raised his hand to interrupt him. "Which umbilical cord blood do you use, and which rabbit?" "Ah. Isn't it okay to just pick one up?" "The umbilical cord blood and the rabbit have corresponding numbers. The numbers are the same, which means that the umbilical cord blood comes from this rabbit, so it can be injected into the body for verification," Greet said tiredly. "You inject umbilical cord blood into different rabbits and release blood replenishing magic, which is equivalent to transfusing rabbits with blood of different blood types. It is normal for hemolytic reactions to occur. This is why we need to study the magic of blood replenishment. Even if the blood type is correct, disseminated intravascular coagulation or other more troublesome conditions may occur. It's much better to produce your own blood." Cuthaoak. "Abba Abba. Why do I feel like I can't understand a word? I am obviously a half-step legend. Although I am not a medical expert, my research level in medical treatment is definitely not low. Why does every word Gretel say sound like a string of syllables with unknown meaning to my ears? Is there something wrong with Gretel's glaive, unable to automatically speak the language of the elves? Or is there something wrong with his own language proficiency and he is unable to translate automatically, promptly, and correctly? Could you please switch to human language and say it again? In fact, I can understand human language." Gretel. "Anyway, please remember that only the umbilical cord blood and the rabbit's numbers can be injected for verification. If the numbers are different, if injected, it is easy to kill the person, no, the rabbit." With the example of Cuthaoak in the past, other elves were more disciplined when doing verification work and did not dare to go too far. The only thing that was beyond Gretel's guidance was that they set up a series of magic circles, one for each rabbit. A light screen was erected on the magic circle, and the 7 color light strips jumped from low to high. Drawing blood from a rabbit, the light strip that rises high and falls downwards, the purple part fades, the blue part fades, and then falls to the cyan part. After injecting the umbilical cord blood, the light cord continued to drop a small section and got stuck between green and cyan. The blood replenishing magic was thrown up, and the light belt quickly expanded and reached the junction of blue and purple. It works. It works. Really very useful. The breath of life is enhanced. The elves roared with joy. Gretel came over and took a curious look. This is a magic circle that detects the breath of life, Kusa-Oak happily explained to Gretel. This is a magic circle designed by integrating a series of spells such as fortune observation technique and detection of animals and plants. It is used to detect the strength of the breath of life. It is particularly easy to use. It is easier to use than mental perception. Gretel looked up and down, left and right. This thing has quite a lot in common with the mental power testing device he saw in the meditation room of the Tower of Babel in Nevis a long time ago. However, what is the essence of the life breath detected by this magic array? This thing is pretty good. Can you teach me later? Sure. Cough. Cough, Elder Fahim coughed loudly next to him. Greet looked sideways at him and pursed her lips. Ah, let's go back to the previous experiment. Each person is responsible for 2 groups of rabbits, 10 in each group, half male and half female. After a group of blood draws, normal saline is injected, and then umbilical cord blood is injected to release the magic of blood replenishment. After a group of blood draws, umbilical cord blood is directly injected to release the magic of blood replenishment. Closely monitor their vital signs, and monitor their blood cell count 1 hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, and 12 hours after the spell is cast. What? The screams started again. I used to do 1 group every day, but why did I suddenly do 2 groups? Moreover, 2 groups of rabbits were tested 4 times each, which is approximately 8 times the workload. Can they directly use the life monitoring array to measure it? Can it? Can it? Can it? And most importantly, Kutha-Oak looked at the rabbits, then at the test tube containing the umbilical cord blood, then at the rabbits, then at the test tube. So, in the future, when replenishing blood for soldiers, will they have to use their own umbilical cord blood? Where can I find this thing? It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1309. Gretel, rightward arrow. Rightward arrow. Using cord blood. Save 1 or several copies of umbilical cord blood for each soldier. When a large amount of blood is lost and blood is needed to be replenished, the umbilical cord blood will be injected into his body, and then the blood replenishment magic will be activated. Having said this, I don't know how to evaluate you. Is your imagination too rich or your imagination too poor? Where can I find umbilical cord blood? Huh, he said softly. Have any of today's soldiers saved their umbilical cord blood after birth? That's obviously impossible. The elves are not like those guys from Black Crow Swamp. They like to preserve all kinds of tissues of the human body, regardless of their usefulness. In fact, the practice of preserving umbilical cord blood, even in Greet's previous life, only came about after there was a need to use umbilical cord blood stem cells to treat leukemia. And these elf warriors who have never saved their umbilical cord blood should be stuffed back into their mother's womb 1 by 1 and reborn again. Gretel didn't say this, he just glanced sideways at Kusa-Oak and gave him a look that said, "You'll understand it yourself." I can see the face of Kusa-Oak changing from white to yellow, from yellow to green, from green to blue. At first glance, it looks like leaves that have just sprouted on an oak tree, and then gradually grow, mature, and go through spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Before the leaf finally fell, Elder Fahim felt sorry for the Kusa-Oak tree and asked softly. So, Greet, why did you choose umbilical cord blood as the subject of your experiment? It's easy to see clearly, Gretel was particularly confident. You see, when doing in vivo experiments, you have to draw blood from rabbits, eliminate the influence of the rabbit's physical condition, and collect data every few hours. If you use umbilical cord blood. Gretel raised his hand and gestured. Stretch your fingertips forward and swipe across a virtual test tube from top to bottom. Brush, it's red. You can see it at a glance. Okay, that's certainly a reason. Elder Fahim shrugged and found that he couldn't find anything to complain about, so he could only take a half step back. Gretel shook his head and smiled. Using umbilical cord blood is the first step. Cord blood has a large target, and it is easy to verify the safety and effectiveness of the spell. After the verification is completed, what happens next? Asked more than one voice eagerly. Greet spread his hands. Just keep going. Well, you can freely form groups and then try to come up with your own solutions to see which one is most effective. There was a sound of brushing, and 5 or 6 hands were raised at the same time. Gretel divided them into groups without fail. If you want to continue researching umbilical cord blood, continue researching. Those who dare to try to study bone marrow can also take a few rabbits to try to practice bone penetration. Of course, the simplest and crudest group is to use existing spell models directly on other animals. After using it up, go find other monsters and use them on monsters with levels from low to high. Take 20 ml of blood from the rabbit. Blood replenishing magic, activate. Record the readings of the life detection array, from 81, to 82, to 83. 4 eyes stared nervously at the magic light screen, watching the light beam on the magic circle change from the green top to cyan, and then to a small half of the cyan grid. Then there is no more. The beam of light stopped moving, not moving anymore. The advantage is that after the blood replenishing magic dissipates, the light beam still maintains its original height and does not fall down like it did when the healing spell was thrown before. The disadvantage is that if you directly throw blood replenishing magic on the rabbit, the effect of the same spell will be much lower than injecting umbilical cord blood. Can we only use umbilical cord blood? The two elves looked at each other. It is impossible to use umbilical cord blood all the time. Even if you don't think about it with your head or the dead skin on your knees, you know it is impossible. Without using umbilical cord blood, what method can be used to enhance the effect of blood replenishing magic? Don't be dazed, Gretel shouted. Continue testing. Test spell output, duration, and spell effects. Record the effects every 1 hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, and 12 hours. The elves worked hard. However, it's clear that some people can't wait any longer. The news spread that night, and at noon the next day, Elder Emmett brought 5 legends and dozens of high-level healers, and blocked the outside of Gretel's research institute. Mage Nordmark, it is said that you have created blood replenishing magic. Excited heart, trembling hands. From his white hair to his beard to the tips of his long eyebrows, Elder Emmett was trembling gently. Thousands of years, thousands of years. How many generations of elves and healers have gone on and on, consuming countless youth and energy, even he himself has spent hundreds of years on this subject, but still in vain. Watching those soldiers losing too much blood on the battlefield, there was no better way than slowly recuperating. Watching helplessly, those soldiers who lost too much blood had to grit their teeth and rush to the battlefield before they had finished recuperating. And they, the healers, were unable to help the soldiers. Now, there is actually a young, foreign half-elf who has taken the first step in replenishing blood with magic. How is the effect? Can it be used? Can you teach us? The value of this spell, no matter what you use to exchange it for, is worth it? Even if one, or even several, legendary level spells or related resources are used in exchange, the elves will make a lot of money. The effect is not very good. Greet smiled helplessly and spread his hands to him. Elder Emmett stepped forward and stared at the whiteboard at the end of the laboratory. Is it like this? Is this a spell configuration, so simple, so clear? Can I try it? Please, Kusa Oak, prepare the experimental conditions for the Great Elder. Kutha Oak jumped up and ran to work. Soon, Elder Amat saw 12 rabbits, 6 males and 6 females, arranged in a row. On each rabbit, a life detection array is hung, and a row of microscopes and smear equipment are waiting. Draw blood. Gretel said. 12 elves came forward at the same time and drew 20 ml of blood from each rabbit. Record. Gretel said. The 12 elves were busy recording the data of the life detection array, and the counting sounds came one after another. 80. 81. 80. Distinguish between the experimental group and the control group. Experimental Group 1 releases blood replenishing magic. Elder Amat personally stepped forward to cast the spell. While casting the spell, concentrate slightly and feel the fluctuation of the spell and the breath of life of the rabbit. This spell is a bit complicated, but not too complicated. If it covers the whole body of a rabbit, the power output is probably equivalent to level 3. To cover the whole body of a high-level warrior to achieve a therapeutic effect, the power output may rise to level 7. The effect is indeed there, the reading. The readings are rising. 81, 82, 83, 85. So amazing, worthy of being an elder. We can get up to 83. Experimental Group 2. Rehydration and volume expansion. Gretel continued to give orders. Another group of elves came forward, injected needles into the rabbits, spawned vines, and connected Ringer's solution. They watched the clear and transparent liquid flow into the rabbit's blood vessels drop by drop. Monitoring the reading, 83, 85, 86, 88. Life strength, the reading has reached 88. Elder Amat. What the hell? A 3-ring blood replenishing magic can enhance the life strength, but it is not as good as this tube. What did it come from? Brine. This is magic. It's healing magic. How can it be worse than salt water? It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1310. Chapter 1305 Elder, can you help me develop a little magic? The inefficient blood replenishing magic is definitely not as effective as directly adding salt water. Gretel pouted. Otherwise, when facing a large amount of blood loss clinically, why is the first step not to immediately transfuse blood, but to immediately replenish fluid and expand volume? After all, the direct consequences of insufficient blood volume include palpitation and chest tightness caused by cardiac compensation, dizziness caused by insufficient blood supply to the brain, and weakened blood circulation throughout the body. Worse than a lack of blood cells. Hypovolemic shock, thought it was a joke. But if the blood volume increases and the blood cells decrease by 10% or something, then it won't be a big problem. If you leave it alone, the human body can slowly recover. In contrast, if the blood loss is only 10%, it is not even clinically recommended to transfuse blood cells to avoid causing more problems. However, no matter what the principle behind this is, it cannot change the reality that the blood replenishing magic developed by Greet is not even as effective as directly injecting normal saline. Faced with such an otherworldly effect, the Great Elder could only sigh in despair while being delighted. After all, the future is indeed bright, and the road is indeed tortuous. It would be a big joke to say that a blood replenishing magic that is not as effective as salt water can be used on the battlefield immediately. Continue to study carefully and tell me what you need. If you don't understand anything, you can ask me. Elder Emmett patted Greet on the shoulder. If you need research materials, reference books, and spell scrolls, need auxiliary spells, or need someone to help you split magic, you can come to me for all your needs. Great, Gretel's eyes lit up. Then can you help me develop a spell? It's just, to confirm the number of blood cells. He took Grand Elder Amat and the Legends of the Magic Academy to visit his laboratory, especially the equipment for diluting red blood cells, smears, and microscopy. Seeing under the microscope a counting device with 400 small squares densely packed on a 1 square millimeter grid, even the experienced elder Ahmad, who is over 1,000 years old, feels dizzy. But Gretel was still looking at him eagerly. You see, so far, this work has been particularly troublesome and has hindered our research progress. Elder, you see. Is it possible to develop a spell that can confirm the number of blood cells in a milliliter of blood by raising your hand and patting it? Lower the difficulty of this spell, lower it again, lower it to level 5, level 3, or even level 1, to the point where a lowest level healer can easily shoot it. I just want a fully automatic blood tester. An automatic tester that can do routine blood tests cost 10,000 yuan apiece in my previous life. I didn't even count on a routine blood test anymore, so I just tested red blood cells. How could it be reduced to 1,000 yuan apiece? The elder, who had seen Gretel's help develop a small spell for the first time, inhaled, exhaled, inhaled again, and exhaled again. This spell doesn't sound too difficult at first glance, but it's extremely difficult when you think about it in detail, especially since it requires precision and the spell is simple and easy to understand. It's really difficult. But can he say it can't be done? Ah, can he say it? Greet, a little guy who is less than 50 years old, has not received any orthodox magical education from elves, and has just reached the advanced level. He has already developed a rudimentary form of blood replenishing magic. It's rare to ask him to do a small favor. Can he say it's too difficult, he can't do it, and he doesn't want to do it? That won't work decisively. Betting on the reputation of the legendary elders, betting on the reputation of all the legendary elders in the Elf Magic Academy, he had to develop this little spell and make it beautifully. Elder Ahmad agreed immediately. After getting rid of the most troublesome work, Gretel once again concentrated on the follow-up research on blood replenishing magic. Well, thoroughly studying the principles of a spell will help improve the power of the spell and reduce the difficulty of the spell anyway. Therefore, we still have to continue to toss with umbilical cord blood, and toss with umbilical cord blood in different ways. Our mission is to find out which type of cells in the umbilical cord blood are most responsive to this spell. Then find out which type of cells in the human body can produce the most blood cells under this spell. What to do? Take your time, centrifuge the umbilical cord blood, centrifuge, layer it, take out different cells, and repeat the experiment again. Repeat it over and over again, and you can always find it. Greet's area you can always find it out means longer and harder work. After all, the centrifuge buzzed for a long time, dividing the umbilical cord blood into 3 layers, with a vast amount of plasma in the upper layer. The lower layer is dark in color and contains blood cells and platelets, which cannot bear the heavy responsibility of self-differentiation. Most of the thin layer of nucleated cells are white blood cells. There are still a bunch of neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, eosinophils, basophils. As for things like hematopoietic stem cells and progenitor cells that can truly differentiate, Greet seems to have read papers in his previous life, and it seems that they only account for 0.36% plus or minus 0.22% of the total number of nuclear cells or white blood cells. There is no flow cytometer and only the buzzing of the centrifuge. With a slight slip of the hand and a slightly larger movement, these precious cells can be schemed off to nowhere. Mage Nordmark, what should I do? Mage Nordmark, no, I can't do it. Mage Nordmark failed again. One after another wailing sounds echoed throughout the laboratory. Greet had a straight face and raised his voice. Don't make any noise. Don't make any noise. First separate the upper layer, the middle layer, the lower layer, layer by layer, and try layer by layer. With his instructions, the elves could only work honestly and hard. Fortunately, these elves have high spellcasting levels per capita, powerful spellcasting abilities, and precise spellcasting control. The centrifuge buzzes for a while, then layers and absorbs, and you can actually do it yourself. Water control technique. Negative pressure suction. With a whooshing sound, the plasma in the upper layer of the test tube turned into a light yellow water dragon and plunged into the test tube next door. Immediately, an elf pounced on him and held it up as if he had found a treasure. Blood replenishing magic. Blood replenishing magic. Blood replenishing magic. Mage Nordmark seems to have failed. Well, if you fail, just fail. Gretel nodded without surprise. Plasma plus plasma is still plasma, it won't become something else. There are not even cells, where can we induce cell differentiation? Water control technique. Negative pressure suction. The second time the spell was cast, a thin layer of nucleated cells was attracted out and placed separately. The remaining thick red substance, blood cells and platelets were rushed up by the elf impatiently, took them and injected them into the serum. Blood replenishing magic. Blood replenishing magic. Replenish blood, demon, Nordmark mage, why can't it work? T. So much blood. So much thick blood. Why is it that so much blood has been poured into the blood replenishing magic, but it doesn't respond? Hematopoietic stem cell and progenitor cell content, data source. Analysis of various parameters of umbilical cord blood cells in 1026 cases in North China. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Jialan 2020. Chapter 1311. Isn't it possible to use red blood cells as a base to generate blood? That definitely won't work. Greet looked back at the two red and swollen faces that were almost full of tears, and sighed silently. I had no choice but to knock on their desk. Change to a high-power microscope. Change to a high-power microscope. Take a closer look at the cells in the blood and see what they look like. Label the cell membrane, cytoplasm, and nucleus for me. The two hapless elves whined and tried. I collected blood cells, diluted them, made smears, spent a long time under the microscope, and then came back dejected and reported. The nucleus cannot be seen. It must not be visible. Be it red blood cells or platelets, they don't have nuclei, right? Without a nucleus, how can we replicate ourselves? Get your feet? After telling the elves about the steps of cell replication, Gretel held up his cheek and looked at the last thin layer of nucleated cells. What should I do? 0.36%, or at most 0.58%, of stem cells seems impossible to produce, otherwise, it can only be broken if the jar is broken. Inject into the test tube. Conduct in vitro testing. It's red, it's red. This is red, the elf who took over the experiment shouted excitedly. Greet nodded calmly. Repeat the experiment. Repeat twice. Repeat 3 times. Very good. Very good. Well done. After adding nucleated cells isolated from umbilical cord blood to the serum in the test tube, the effect of the blood replenishing magic can be said to be immediate. The red color in the test tube rose almost immediately. From the point where the nucleated cells were dripped, it spread throughout the test tube, showing that the hematopoietic stem cells inside were self-replicating and proliferating, growing 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times. It grows exponentially, and eventually, enough blood cells are formed and replenished into the blood in large quantities. Repeat 3 times for each person. Gretel raised a big smile and said energetically. Each person receives 3 portions of umbilical cord blood, puts it into a centrifuge, and releases blood replenishing magic in each part to observe its effects. Now, let's begin. The elves filed in and filed out. Soon, the humming sound of the centrifuge filled the entire room. After another short while, ah, oh, various sounds expressing surprise or sudden realization, sounded one after another in front of each experimental stage and each microscope. You remember, after inspecting every experimental station and reading every experimental report, Greet jumped to the podium and concluded his speech. Not all parts of the umbilical cord blood respond to the blood replenishment magic. Only a small part of the umbilical cord blood, the part with nucleated cells, and even a small part of the nucleated cells respond. Now, the experiment continues. Use your mental power to lock the whole umbilical cord blood, focus on the part with nucleated cells, and try to release the blood replenishing magic again. It turns out that understanding spells can indeed help increase spell power, or whatever. After this round of experiments and intuitive observation of spells, although the spell output of the elves has not changed, the effects of the spells have increased to a higher level. The visual effect can be seen. The red color in the serum test tube quickly spreads and is much thicker than when the spell was cast before. The results of the microscopic examination show that the number of red blood cells under the microscope has also increased than before. 10 times more. At least 10 times more. From Kusa Oak to Elder Fahim, everyone looked at Gretel in the wrong way. Just by adjusting his cognition, the power of blood replenishing magic increased by more than 10 times. It would be great if other spells could do such good things. If the other attack spells of the elves can be increased by 10 times, the enemies on the other side of the Great Rift will not have to worry about being destroyed. There is no need for everyone to work hard, the fight is so hard. Gretel was not satisfied. 10 times, what's 10 times? If the blood loss is 400 ml, 800 ml, or even more, is it enough to replenish the blood at once? Can it have both volume expansion and rehydration functions? Can it adapt according to the amount of blood loss of the recipient? For high-level warriors, can they produce stronger, well, maybe stronger blood to supply their combat needs? Gretel knows nothing. Everything requires him to keep experimenting and improving. At least one thing is that umbilical cord blood alone is not enough. We have to find another way to have direct effect on the recipient. Record the fluctuation characteristics of the spell. Record, where the blood replenishing magic triggers the greatest reaction on the subject. Greet just issued the order. In fact, he was not sure whether there was such a detection circle, how accurate it was, and whether it could perfectly cover the whole body of the recipient. But obviously, the elves have accumulated a lot in this area. Gretel gave an order, and the elves set up a detection circle, covering the whole body of the rabbit. Cast a spell. Cast a spell. Above the detection circle, the shadow of a rabbit rose quietly. The dense magic light and shadow outline the outline of the rabbit, its bones, internal organs, and blood vessels. Every detail is specific and subtle. As soon as the blood replenishing magic fell off, the shadow of the rabbit shimmered brightly and dimly. Greet couldn't help but take a few steps quickly and stared at the phantom. On the shadow, some places are bright and some places are dim. In general, with the heart as the center, a large and fine network is spread out, and every part of the veins, arteries, and blood flowing through it lights up. But the blood vessels are not the brightest yet. The brightest part. Strangeness. Strangeness. It's not a blood vessel. Why, when it comes to blood replenishing magic, the part of the body that reacts the most is not the blood vessels. Can't blood replicate itself? Wait a minute, this lit area is dash. A total of 10 elves gathered around a magic circle, head to head, pointed ears to pointed ears, and the crowd was denser than the subway in the morning rush hour. But no matter how crowded they were, everyone still made room for Gretel, allowing him to look directly at the magic circle with his hands behind his back without any hindrance, and whispered. Record. The part of the blood replenishing magic that triggers the magic reaction is mainly concentrated in the spleen, and the bones. The long bones of the limbs, including the humerus, femur, and iliac bones. When speaking, his eyes were shining brightly, his hands were behind his back, holding each other firmly. One on the left and one on the right, two elves stood beside him, recording without raising their heads. Forget about the spleen, this thing is too brittle and will bleed easily at the slightest touch. Bones, bones. Take the bone puncture needle, puncture the bone marrow, put it into the serum test tube, and release the blood replenishing magic for testing. What, need to pierce the bones again? More screams and wails came and went. The monthly tickets for December 2022 ended with 8,331 monthly tickets. There are many words of gratitude I want to say, but I am exhausted both physically and mentally, so I can only say thank you to everyone in unison. According to the agreement, I owe you 14 monthly tickets and extra updates in January, plus the 27 extra updates owed for rewards, a total of 41 extra updates are owed. I made a form and remembered each one. I have been exhausted both physically and mentally lately, so please bear with me a little longer. Thanks. Thank you. In 2023, I wish everyone good health, peace, and joy, and everything goes well. You have to be good. You must be good. The author and little Gretel wish everyone well. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1312. Bone marrow aspiration and in vitro culture achieved excellent results. Every elf who worked with his own hands watched helplessly as a bright red rose in the test tube containing the serum. Getting thicker and thicker, more and more vivid. Marrow can also produce blood. Yeah, bone marrow is fine too. Have you seen this? Bone marrow can also react to blood replenishing magic. Everyone has bone marrow in their body. Lots and lots of bone marrow. Everyone, work hard. Target the blood replenishing magic on the bone marrow. Try again. Do a comparative experiment. Do a comparative experiment. The centrifuge started humming again. It is said that bone marrow is useful, but umbilical cord blood comes first. Who dares to say whether all bone marrow is useful, or only certain types of bone marrow, or certain cells in bone marrow are useful? Gretel first compared red bone marrow with yellow bone marrow. Experiments have proven that red bone marrow responds extremely strongly to blood replenishing magic, with almost immediate results. Yellow bone marrow can't be said to be unresponsive, but compared to red bone marrow, it takes 100 times more effort. If you have this power, you might as well go directly to generate blood. So the answer is red marrow, huh? Of course not. Greet calmed down and designed a second round of experiments. In the first group, red bone marrow was directly injected into the serum. In the second group, bone marrow mononuclear cells were injected. In the third group, bone marrow fluid without cell components was injected. In the fourth group, bone marrow cells with the supernatant removed were injected. Of course, as a control group, there is also a permanent fifth group, no bone marrow, just dripping with normal saline. Conclusion: the conclusion is a bit surprising. The first group, those injected with complete red bone marrow, had the strongest hematopoietic effect. The effects of the second and fourth groups were also good, but not as good as the first group. The third group, the effect of the third group is actually not at all. Gretel was very suspicious that this was because they did not extract the cells completely during the centrifugation operation, and some were still missed. Greet took a deep breath and began to write quickly to record the conclusion. The conclusion of the second round of experiments surprised him too much. Sure enough, people still can't pat their heads. They need to conduct experiments to verify. In conclusion, 1. The cellular components in autologous red bone marrow and the growth factors in the supernatant both promote blood cell differentiation. 2. The cellular components in autologous red bone marrow and the bone marrow supernatant containing growth factors have a synergistic effect in promoting the differentiation of blood cells. 3. Autologous red bone marrow can be used for repair and treatment of blood cells, and the main promoting component is present in bone marrow mononuclear cells. Alas, none of them can be missing. Greet estimated that it may be the body itself that provides enough support for the production of blood cells. No matter is created out of thin air. The growth of blood cells requires the differentiation of hematopoietic stem cells and stromal cells to provide a breeding ground for their growth. It requires the body to work hard to provide them with various nutrients. A test tube filled with serum cannot provide the most suitable environment and nutrition, but inside the bone marrow cavity, they are the perfect fit. Originally, there was no need for manual adjustment or simulation. There is no need for humans to test and test, calculate and calculate, add serum, add antibiotics, add heparin, add iron hemaprotein, and drop various ingredients in units of 0.1% or even 0.01%. The inside of the bone marrow cavity will naturally provide the most suitable temperature, the most suitable nutrients, and the most suitable ingredient ratio. Inside the human body, red bone marrow will naturally differentiate, and yellow bone marrow will also be mobilized to transform into red bone marrow. Stromal cells strive to provide all the elements for the growth of blood cells, and blood vessels strive to input nutrients into the bone marrow cavity. Mage Nordmark, how powerful can our blood replenishing magic be? It should be very strong, right? Greet stopped writing and thought for a moment. According to the efficiency of healing wounds he saw when he released the healing technique before. A wound that takes an average of 7 days and 144 hours to grow will usually heal within 6 minutes or 1/10 of an hour, to the point where there is no scar left. Calculated this way, the efficiency of wound treatment should be 1,440 times the normal healing speed of the human body. So, the whole body's hematopoietic capacity is normally producing 500 million new red blood cells per hour, or 2 million per second. Within 120 to 200 days, red blood cells complete one metabolism. How about increasing this speed by 1440 times? Then the whole body's hematopoietic ability can progress to the point where it can produce all the blood cells required by the whole body within 6.94 hours. If a person only loses 400 ml, no, there is no need to use blood replenishing magic on 400 ml, just rest. If only 800 ml or 1200 ml of blood is lost, then the blood replenishing magic can theoretically make up for all the lost blood within 1 hour to 1.5 hours. Look, as long as we achieve the most precise stimulation and achieve the same effectiveness as normal healing techniques, our blood replenishing magic can completely restore the injured to health. Gretel slowly calculated for everyone, and sure enough, he saw happy and excited expressions on the faces of the elves. Facing the bright faces, he couldn't help but smile. Even if the stimulation is less precise and the speed is slower, it won't be a big problem. I don't think you want our soldiers to go to the battlefield immediately after losing a lot of blood within an hour, right? Of course not. No way. It would be great if I could rest for 10 days and a half. As long as we can rest for about a month and the soldiers can recover before the next Great Rift battle begins, you will be of great help, Gretel. You will be of great help. It's such a good thing to be able to help. Greet sighed softly. As long as I can help a little bit, let those soldiers feel more relaxed and comfortable. It is assumed that there is a gap of about a month between each battle. Without blood replenishing magic, they might rush to the front line with their weak bodies when the month comes. And with blood replenishing magic, these warriors can recover within a day or a week. For the next 29 days, or 21 days, they don't have to lie in bed and suffer from weakness. It doesn't matter that they can walk around, look around, eat something delicious, exercise or play against each other. In short, even if fighting is the fate of a soldier, it is a good thing to improve the quality of life in the process. With the goal, the elves were very excited. Next, without Gretel's supervision, they automatically and consciously divided into groups and began to promote the testing and progress of blood replenishing magic. The mental power targets the most effective treatment parts, such as the long bones and skeletal bones of the limbs, and compares the caster's mental power with the whole body of the recipient. For example, find all kinds of monsters, from low level to high level, try them on them and observe their reactions. For example, writing applications, typing reports, and treating soldiers who have lost excessive blood. Another example is to find out some commonly used blood replenishing drugs, let the soldiers take them orally, and observe the blood replenishing effect. Work harder. Work harder. Everyone move. The healers who had withdrawn from the front line and had a rare period of time to recuperate were feeling the wind at their feet. We don't have much time. Before the next war in the Great Rift begins, a mature treatment plan must be formulated to prevent our soldiers from suffering. The composition of autologous bone marrow cells is referenced from experimental study on repairing radial bone defects in rabbits using autologous red bone marrow and its different components combined with PCPC, Benview Medical College, Department of Surgery, 2011, Master's Thesis. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1313. The framework of blood replenishing magic has been successfully developed. The next step is to further analyze it, conduct tests on high-level monsters and high-level warriors, and determine the most appropriate spells and spell-casting rhythm. These are all hard work and need to be tested and adjusted slowly. These matters can be left to those elves who have a higher level than Gret, have deeper knowledge of magic than Gret, and have a wider range of people than Gret to study and formulate a series of long-term projects. As for Gretel herself, the question can be concluded. You can write a paper and form a summary. Gret closed the door and began writing his thesis. Well, the first part, the significance of research and development of blood replenishing magic. The second part, ideas for developing blood replenishing magic, how to compare regeneration and cloning. The third part, in the process of developing blood replenishing magic, the experiments and pitfalls that have been done prove the paths that work and the paths that don't. The fourth part, the conclusion of blood replenishing magic, and the future development direction of this magic. Under the magic lamp, Gret wrote without raising her head, forgetting to sleep and eat. Cyrilla was beside him, with bright eyes, holding her chin and staring at his cheek. Stand up for a while, sit down for a while, get up and circle for a while, sit back down for a while. Oops, it's already very late. Is Gret thirsty? Are you hungry? He didn't even eat dinner. Will asking him to have dinner now interrupt his train of thought? If you don't ask him to have dinner now, it's already been 2 hours since dinner. Will being hungry affect his thinking? Gretel said that being too hungry can cause hypoglycemia or something, and the mind can become dizzy. She turned around, then around again, and suddenly her eyes lit up. He touched his pocket, took out a finger-sized crimson fruit, brought it to his lips, and knocked it lightly. The upper front teeth and the lower front teeth just closed slightly, and when they touched the peel opened slightly, and the sweet juice flowed out. Cyrilla took a hard sip of juice and couldn't help laughing. This is not bad. This tastes good. It's sweet, refreshing, and has a vibrant umami flavor. Gretel hates fruit that is too sweet. In his words, it will choke your throat. She stuffed the fruit into her mouth, swallowed it whole, and licked her fingertips. Then he turned over his hand and took out a lot more. He held it fully in the palm of his left hand, picked up one in his right hand and brought it to Gretel's lips. Hey, eat it. She spoke carefully in a breathy voice. The air flowed gently from between the lips and teeth. Even if I didn't raise my ears, I couldn't hear clearly. The fruit touched Greet's lips gently. Greet lowered his head and concentrated on writing the paper, but his lips parted slightly in response. Cyrilla grinned, quickly stuffed the sweet, juicy, seedless fruit into his mouth, and whispered, "Eat." "Hey, he's chewing." The corners of his eyes curved. Cyrilla was greatly encouraged. She happily lay on the corner of the table, staring at Gretel's cheeks swelling up, deflating, swelling up, deflating again, and his Adam's apple rolling in a circle from top to bottom. "Well, swallow it. Then take another one. Eat." This time, Cyrilla's slender fingertips pushed the fruit deeper into Greet's mouth. There was a soft pop sound, and a small corner of the peel was pinched. The sweet juice flowed down, and Gretel sucked it unconsciously. "Oops." Cyrilla withdrew her fingers in panic. Carrying it behind my back, I rubbed it gently twice, wanting to wash it off but reluctant to let it go. After a pause, seeing that Greet was still concentrating on writing, he secretly pulled it back, stuffed it into his mouth and sucked it. "Well, this fruit is also ripe and sweet. Just feed one, and then another, and then another." After feeding 2 handfuls of fruits, seeing Gretel's eyes brightening and his stomach no longer growling, Cyrilla bent her eyes and lay down comfortably. Alas, Greet has always wanted to do this research ever since the fertile forest. Keep doing it, keep failing, keep doing it, always have no clue. After crossing the ocean and coming to Yangju Island, after struggling for so long, I finally made it. Although there were many other elves with help, and even the spell configuration was made by other elves, the creativity was Gretel's. It was Greet who provided the most important ideas and controlled the research direction throughout the entire process. On this point, there is nothing wrong with saying that the blood replenishing magic was completely developed by Gretel. Cyrilla looked at Gretel's side face happily, with a smile in her eyes, and she was even happier than she had done the research. After looking at it for a while, he got up again, tiptoed to Greet's side, lowered his head to look at his manuscript paper. In this round of research, we have not revealed the fundamental mystery of blood replenishing magic, nor have we revealed what types of cells and what mechanisms drive the massive production of blood cells. In addition, we have not yet understood the effect of this blood replenishing magic on high-level warcraft and high-level warriors, and how they respond to this magic. Alas, Greet is always like this. Cyrilla sighed with admiration and distress. His pursuit of truth and research will never end. When others think it's already very good and it's done, Gretel always thinks of what more can be studied and what can be done more. Greet brushed and brushed, finished writing the last period, and then checked it from beginning to end. Turning his head, he saw Cyrilla lying next to him, looking at him unblinkingly, with bright eyes, as if looking at the treasure in a dragon's nest. Gretel couldn't help laughing. "Cyrilla, what are you looking at?" "I'm watching." Cyrilla suddenly jumped up. He rushed to Gretel, raised his hand and touched his forehead. "Gretel, you have already researched this blood replenishing magic, right?" "Yes." Greet stepped back reflexively, then stopped quickly and let Cyrilla touch her forehead. "I don't have a fever. I don't feel uncomfortable anywhere else. Why are you touching my forehead?" "Then, Greet, haven't you advanced yet?" Cyrilla retracted her hand and circled around him. "Turn left, then turn again," frowning more and more. "Such an important spell has been researched, why haven't you advanced yet? What is needed? Is meditation not enough? Or are the resources not enough? Do you need more natural power? Gretel, can we propose one of the 3 legendary resources?" "Ah!" Gretel couldn't help but laugh. He took a step forward and wanted to hug Cyrilla. He raised his hand, but he just patted her hand gently. "Cyrilla, don't be like this. The blood replenishing magic is just a small spell, really, just a small application spell. I have a hunch that if you want to advance, you need more and more important research. Hematopoietic stem cells have not been isolated, progenitor cells have not been isolated, and the internal environment of hematopoiesis has not been elucidated. The entire blood replenishing magic is completely forced out by combining high-level magic with dismantling and dismantling. To put it bluntly, this spell has not been adjusted to the best level yet, so why should it be advanced based on it? Gretel raised his head and turned his face across the roof, across the wall, looking in the direction of Nevis. I'm just thinking now, how to send this magic and this paper back. Thanks to at Bing by Chunkai Lushus Hung for the 5,000 starting coins. Big brother, please use the web page next time to reward. Apple will deduct a large sum of money, and it will arrive 3 months later. It hurts T. Thanks to at Muijio Jinlin for the reward of 500 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1314. Greet will definitely send the paper and magic back. This magic, although Gretel said before, is just a small applied magic, but applied magic does not mean unimportant magic. Gretel fully understood the value of this magic. It is no exaggeration and no shame to say that this is a strategic magic. To a certain extent, it can change the balance of power between the two sides. While Nevis is still at a disadvantage against the glorious Holy See, this magic, on the one hand, can greatly strengthen Nevis' power. On the other hand, it can unite the nobles and the three churches around the magic council to a great extent. Who doesn't want his soldiers who have lost a lot of blood to recover quickly, very quickly, as soon as possible? But, of course, the premise of everything is to keep it confidential. To keep it strictly confidential, it is best to send the paper directly to the teacher, or at worst, to a trusted legend. However, sending it back confidentially, safely, and quickly is something Greet cannot do with his current abilities. It's easy to communicate with a bird and let it help you send a letter. To communicate with a bird that is strong enough to accurately cross 2 oceans, find the target, and put down the letter? Gretel felt that his ability to communicate with animals was not that strong yet. Of course, if he wanted to, he could ask Elder Fahim, or any elder, to send him a letter. Today, Gretel believed that no legendary elder would be willing to reject him. But for one thing, this spell has not been completely polished yet and will not be sent until it is complete. Furthermore, Greet calculated with his fingers, the senior brother should be coming soon, right? What I said before is that when Nevis makes 3 or 5 microscopes, the senior brother will come and deliver them once. At that time, the complete spells and papers can be given to senior brother. Eldest brother, it's better to take another transoceanic route by himself, from Yangju Island back to the Mage Tower in the Kingdom of the Sun, or send the paper back all the way. It would be better to reach an agreement with the Elves, build a Mage Tower on Evermeet Island, and try to send the paper back to the Kingdom of the Sun. Anyway, senior brother's abilities are much greater than his. Just leave these things to senior brother to worry about. Then the senior brother came as expected. Driving that wandering small airship, we drove from Nevis to the New World, from the north to the south of the New World, and from the south to Yangju Island. Brave the wind and rain, break through the fog and clouds. Go up to the plateau, go down to the valley, cross the ocean, and skim the sea. Greet was very suspicious that the distance traveled by this small airship in half a year had far exceeded its design limits. The height of climb and one-way distance also exceeded its design limits. By the way, even a small airship is an important asset of the Parliament. I've been floating outside like this for many years, just to deliver a shipment to him. Are the accounts of the Congress balanced? How much blood did the teacher and Thunderhorn spend to rent this airship for half a year and half a year, Half a year and half a year. Do not care. Gretel secretly made up his mind. Anyway, he has money now, and he can afford the rent of the airship. When the time comes, just redeem a little of those legendary resources and bring them back to senior brother. Or you can do it without using legendary resources, his first aid guardianship spell, plus the blood replenishment spell. The resources exchanged should be a large part of it, right? Gretel wiped his face and happily greeted his senior brother. In front of the airship, a golden eagle spreads its wings and flies in the wind. It seemed to be moving slowly. Its wings did not move for a long time, but its speed was not slow at all. It was faster than an airship. I don't know which elf has transformed and is leading the way. Gretel tried his best to observe, and then, and again, but he still couldn't recognize it. He subconsciously activated his flying technique and faced him in the opposite direction. As soon as his feet left the ground, his body suddenly tilted and he stepped heavily on the ground again. When he lowered his head again, several grass stems grew crazily upward from the ground, wrapping around his ankles, calves, and knees, dragging him back to the ground. Looking back, the elves around him were all looking at the airship with their faces raised. On every black and white hair and black and white beard, it says, "Don't look at me, I didn't do it." Great. Well, the airflow between flying objects does interfere with each other, and the faster the speed and the larger the volume, the stronger the interference. Gretel touched his small body, felt his poor flying skills, and then looked at the airship approaching quickly. Forget it, don't commit suicide. Just stand on the ground and wait for your senior brother to land. Just watch the golden eagle hover twice, converge its wings, and turn into a stream of light that pierces the ground. The small airship tilted and descended, and stopped steadily in an open space by the lake. Before the airship door opened, Gretel rushed up like the wind. "Brother! Senior brother Baebo!" Archmage Baebo looked outside the cabin in surprise. He had already seen the reputation of the elves and Evermeet Island in various books of the council. Even in the fertile forest and his group before, the elves treated him with little more than indifference. There is no need to think about enthusiasm or anything else. As long as the water in the well does not offend the river, it is the greatest goodwill. Archmage Baebo originally thought that if he came to give things to little Gretel this time, he would probably receive similar treatment. Go to Yingban Island, call the door from a distance, and wait for 2 or 3 days for someone to send the message. If he's lucky, someone can take him in. Go to the edge of Everlasting Island, sit down and chat with little Gretel, and hand over things. If he's not lucky, maybe he can only wait outside the secret lock, waiting for little Gretel to come out to see him. After the two of them talk, he will have to turn back immediately. However, the treatment he received this time was beyond his expectation. As soon as little Gretel's name was announced, the secret lock was quickly opened, and someone came out to pick him up. The golden eagle transformed into a high-level nature walker leads the way gracefully, and its flying power is no worse than that of a small airship. Pull up the altitude and go over the mountains. Pass by the world tree that connects to the sky, and go straight to the lake surrounded by mountains. Just by looking at the terrain and sensing the strong auras around the lake, Archmage Baebo knew. This place is the center and top priority of Yangju Island. To be able to bring him here, it seems that little Greet is already very trusted on Everlasting Island. "Senior brother! Senior brother!" Gretel shouted as he rushed up. Archmage Baebo walked out of the airship slowly and caught his junior brother. "Little Greet, long time no see. I brought the microscope you asked for. How have you been doing lately?" "I'm having a good time." Gretel pushed him in with all his strength. Pushing in, closing the door, quickly setting up a barrier to prevent detection, lowering his voice. "Senior brother, do you want to participate in the research on the Well of Eternity? If so, I will help you find opportunities. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right. Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1315. What? Research the Well of Eternity? Even if he had an estimate of Gretel's status on Evermeeting Island, Archmage Baebo was still shocked. The Well of Eternity. That is the Well of Eternity. It is the core and lifeblood of the elves. You said you can study it through research? If you say you can put me in for research, you can put me in for research? Even if you, the project team who want to enter the Well of Eternity, the elves may not agree, right? What's more, I am an outsider and a human being. Little Greet, how have you been spending the past few months on Yangju Island? He calmed down and asked in a low voice. Greet raised a big smile. I'm having a great time. The legendary elders all like me, and the world tree also likes me. The world tree personally stretched out its branches and sent me all the way to the top. Archmage Baebo breathed a huge sigh of relief. Greet smiled happily and kept gesticulating. I've met my mother, she's pretty good. I helped her comfort the ancient tree so that she wouldn't have to work so hard. I also met the queen said that in view of my contribution to the elf secret realm, she can give me many resources. Senior brother, would you like to take some back with you? By the way, the blood replenishing magic I recently developed, senior brother, you must help send it back. What? It's only been a few months, another magic trick? Archmage Baebo took the paper and read it at a glance. After reading it roughly once, and then again carefully, after reading it twice, I let out a long sigh. It's really good. Little Greet, what you made is really good. For such an important magic, do you need senior brother to turn back immediately and send it to the mage tower? Gretel chuckled. He affectionately took his senior brother on his arm and walked out. As he walked, he raised his head and said, Senior brother, what do you think the teacher will think when he sees this paper of mine? Teacher. Archmage Baebo pretended to be deep in thought. The handsome and majestic face of the Lord of Thunder flashed through his mind. He curved his lips and smiled. It's a good post. Don't send it again next time, unless it's a paper from the Plastic Energy Department, don't send it again. Brother. Greet rolled her eyes and jumped, trying to protest. How can a teacher be like this? How can a teacher be like this? The teacher loves me the most. No matter what paper I wrote or what magic I developed, he was very happy. He won't say don't send it next time. However, Archmage Baebo had already put his arm around his shoulders. Gretel suspected that the senior brother had blessed him with the power of the barbarian bull or something like that, but he couldn't get away anyway, and walked out with a smile. Little Greet, where are you staying on Yangju Island during this period? Take your senior brother to have a look. What are your main plans for the next stage? As he spoke, he nodded around. After the golden eagle that led the way landed, it turned into a human form and quickly came over to say hello. Archmage Baebo just thanked him, and the other party said, Oh, it's nothing, it's nothing. My brother is studying in Master Nordmark's research group, and I'm grateful for his generous teachings. It's just a guide, it's nothing. Ouch. Little Greet, are you popular on the island? Archmage Baebo looked at his junior brother with a smile. Gretel smiled and continued to move forward. Not far away, I saw a crowd of people in front of me. The elves rushed out with a number and momentum that was very rare on Yangju Island. Mage Nordmark. Your senior brother is here. Mage Nordmark, will the research continue this afternoon? Master Nordmark, are you going to have a banquet tonight? What dishes are you going to prepare? I'll go talk to Aunt Parida. Mage Nordmark, do you want to open a jar of the Moonview wine I brewed? Mage Nordmark. If it were anyone else, he might be filled with pride because of Gretel's popularity. However, Archmage Baebo's first reaction was that his junior brother's social phobia was coming back again. With so many elves in front of him, if the ground was full of wounded, sick, screaming and wailing, Greet's social phobia would never occur. He will only be energetic, face difficulties and attack with all his strength. However, there were smiling faces, warm greetings, and hands stretched out in front of me. Archmage Baebo clearly felt that the shoulders he held were stiff. Okay. We junior brothers haven't seen each other for a long time, just have a place to sit down and chat. Archmage Baebo stepped in for his junior brother, smiling and waving around. Elders and great mages, wait until we have finished talking, and then I will ask you for advice. He dragged Greet, or Greet dragged him, and fled back to his residence. After closing the door, only Greet, Sarah, Bernard, and Apa were there. It was just the same, and they took out things from the space bag. This is a microelectron microscope that was just made by Nevis. It is said that Philby and Black Crow Swamp did it together, but in fact the teacher also took action. Just pretend you don't know, and don't mention this in front of the teacher. It's ready in one fell swoop. Gretel blinked, then blinked again. How do you describe the microelectron microscope in front of you? It was completely different from what he had in mind, a product that was white, cold, hard, put together in several large boxes, and sparkled with the atmosphere of the future. Below is a box half as tall as a man. The silver-gray box walls are dark and dark, with an unknown amount of mithril embedded in them, thanks to his improved method of electrolytic smelting of mithril. On top of the box, there is a small box, completely black. Archmage Baebo clicked on the box a few times and pressed it a few more times. The box opened automatically, with a nebula swirling in it. If you need to see anything, just put it here. Archmage Baebo pointed to his junior brother. Expansion, thinning, and rotation can all be controlled through the force field outside the box. Things illuminated by the microscope will be projected outside with a light curtain for easy observation. With another press, a golden wire was pulled out of the box, and there was actually an interface at the top. This can be inserted into the mobile tower spirit. It is convenient for recording and storage. By the way, you don't have a mobile tower spirit now, right? This time Neva sent one from Black Crow Swamp. What? Black Crow Swamp? Gretel was a little on tenterhooks, fearing that the mobile tower spirit that his senior brother took out was in the shape of a skull. Fortunately, although the share of Black Crow Swamp and the mobile tower spirit itself were uniformly customized from the alchemy branch of the transformation system, nothing went wrong. Greet happily took away the mobile tower spirit and put it away, and studied the microscope and electron microscope for a while under the guidance of his senior brother, feeling refreshed. Now we have a microscope. Next, a lot of research can be done. Maybe he can do the DNA he wants to study and the DNA changes from low-level to high-level monsters. But of course, none of these things are urgent right now. The most urgent thing is, elder brother, you just ran over here? Have you abandoned the mage tower in the kingdom of the sun for the time being? How is the situation over there? Thanks to @bookfriend 202105201508508513331 for the 100 starting coins.